It's time for another episode of Tucson Means Business, featuring Tucson's top entrepreneurs and leaders in the business world. And now your host, Mark Bishop.
And welcome to another Tucson Means Business with Mark Bishop, proudly sponsored by the 49ers Golf and Country Club. And I need to remind you, in reference to that, you can still play golf at the club. Of course, single carts only and separated naturally. They've even got little rubber things in the bottom of the cups where you don't have to touch the flagstick. But, of course, the restaurant is completely shut down. That's not even takeaways to pick up and take away or order. Everything else is shut down completely because of the pandemic. But they are open for golf and would like you to know that. Okay? So welcome to another show. My special guest is John D. Take. And I'm going to say John Take is a P-E and a P-E-N-G and an M-E-N-G. He's the Executive Vice President, Water Business Operating Unit Leader. Welcome, John. Nice to have you on the show.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking all things water.
Yeah, man, it's an important thing for us right now. I wish the monsoons would hurry up, I tell you. But before we go any further, just explain with my ignorance, please, what are the initials after your name?
Sure, Mark. Well, the PE is the professional engineer, so that's the Arizona Board of Technical Registration. That's how they help legislate and regulate the engineering profession in Arizona. Mm-hmm. The P.Eng is the Canadian counterpart. Actually, Arizona and Alberta, where I moved to Tucson from, have a reciprocity agreement. So they allow for the engineering talent to work back and forth between Canada and Arizona quite easily. And then the M.Eng is my master's degree, which I took in water resources. And I took it at the U of A, but I have to tell you it's the U of A North because it was Alberta, not Arizona. So I have to clarify that now. More than one U of A.
Well, either way, thanks for sharing that. But what you're telling me is no dill when it comes to this industry. So I'm looking forward to learning a lot from you today. Now, you serve as Executive Vice President for Stantec's 2,000-strong North American water consultancy team. And this is working in over 120 locations. Now, from what I can ascertain under your direction, Stantec has grown its ability to deliver large and complex water projects addressing climate change and urbanization, as well as the need for sustainable food, water, and energy solutions for a growing world population. That's about it in a nutshell, right?
Yep, not a big deal.
Well, you earned your bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of New Brunswick and your master's in water resources engineering from, as you say, the University of Alberta. What does a master's in water resources look like, John?
So the curriculum and the focus of a postgraduate degree in water resources, if I had to sum it up, it would be all about the problems of too much and not enough. Certainly in Arizona, we're living in an arid to semi-arid environment, and we're very concerned about the not enough side of water. But on the flip side, many parts of the world deal with the challenges of too much water. I spent 7 years recently working in New Orleans, and that's certainly the side of the coin that they're on. So the water resources engineering practice is all about dealing with too much water, not enough. How do we move the water from where we have too much to where it's needed, and how do we do it all efficiently and sustainably and meet the growing water challenges that the world faces? Water is very tied to economics and food and energy.
Yeah.
And so you can't consider one without the other.
Without the other. We're going to touch a little bit later on. I want to talk to you about the Colorado River Basin and so on, and our desert environment here. You do serve as a member of Stantec's Disclosure Committee, recently joined the U.S. Water Alliance Board of Directors. Can you share with us what the U.S. Water Alliance represents?
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. The water industry has a lot of specializations and specialties. We have people that focus on drainage and rainwater and groundwater and wastewater, and obviously potable drinking water. There's a growing movement within the water industry to recognize that there isn't good water and there isn't bad water. There's only one water, and so the U.S. Water Alliance is a collection of agricultural interests and industrial interests, water utilities, wastewater utilities, regulators, that have all joined together to try and do a better job of recognizing that there's only one water. We're all upstream and downstream from somebody else, and that to really solve the world's water problems, we cannot just solve the water problems in isolation. We've got to take a bigger look and work together as more of a community.
Oh, that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. You're well known, John, in the water industry for your expertise in water conveyance planning and design. You've been involved in more than, 100 projects around the world over the last 25 years. Share with us just perhaps one of your proudest achievements, if you would.
Certainly. I think the 7 years I spent in New Orleans really comes to mind. In the desert, we have one relationship with water, and I learned a lot by the 7 years I spent in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. Working with the people that experienced Katrina, down to the household level. While we were there, there's a charity called the St. Bernard Project. And, out of those 7 years, my best day was, we happened to be the last work crew. There was such a diaspora or exit of people from New Orleans, Houston, even as far west as Arizona. So many people were displaced economically by Katrina. This charity was working to restore people's homes in the lower Ninth Ward. And, it was a very proud moment. We were the last work crew, so we were doing some of the drywall and the painting.
Wow.
And we actually got to meet this 75-year-old gentleman and his family. He's a longtime New Orleans resident, and he actually got to come back, and we handed over the keys. And he was gone for 10 years. This was in 2015. Katrina was in 2005. And just to see, by, working with a community like New Orleans, just down at the personal level, how much it meant to his family that he got to come home and live in a New Orleans that doesn't have as much risk. That meant a lot to us. It was a big project. It was a hard project. Some of the largest pumping stations in the world to drain the bowl in New Orleans. Yeah. So technically it was very challenging, but you see the smiles and tears in people's eyes when their lives change.
Oh, it was horrible, wasn't it? I mean, for fortunate ones like us, we just saw everything on the news as much as you can, but being there would be another ball game altogether. I think we're talking money in that particular case, something like $730 million are designed to build permanent canal closures and the Pumps project. It's a lot of money, isn't it?
Well, and that's the challenge that we're facing with developing more resilient coastal communities. New Orleans, we did the last kind of capstone project there, but they spent $14 billion for that community after Katrina. Miami is looking at a $4 billion spend. New York City, Boston, several $100 million just to protect the San Francisco airport. And so, unfortunately, we're seeing sea level rise and climate change, really posing a challenge that, I'm not really, people worry about employment becoming a problem going forward. I think as the world deals with climate change, there's going to be an awful lot of work to do.
Yeah, I mean, the New Orleans thing alone, one of the largest drainage pumping systems in the world, capable of moving more than, 16 billion gallons of water per day. I think it was the History Channel that I saw it. It was called Project Impossible, and it was amazing. Let's talk about Stantec, John. There are approximately 22,000 employees working in over 350 locations across 6 continents. So what type of personnel does the firm employ?
Oh, a great variety of professionals. We're one of the largest architects in North America. We're the largest water company in the United Kingdom. Healthcare in the Middle East is a huge business for us. A lot of buildings engineering professionals, transportation. We're upgrading the Long Island Railroad right now, and then obviously a lot of water folks in the business that I work with, environmental services, water, power and dams, energy and resources. and as I mentioned, transportation. So, we do a lot of work with public infrastructure, and we do a lot of work for private clients as well.
Well, the company was, founded in 1954. Is it a Tucson original company?
No, Arizona is our beachhead in the U.S. So Stantec started in 1954 in Western Canada. There was a gentleman who was a hockey player, but he wasn't that good of a hockey player, so he went and got his doctorate at Harvard in environmental science. And so he went down to Harvard and got his degree and went back to Western Canada and started the company. And then, as they grew out of Western Canada, they looked and saw the United States as the future.
Mm-hmm.
And the original initial growth into the United States happened in Arizona. So back into the 90s, we entered the Arizona market. And then through acquisitions and mergers have grown. When I started, we had 1,200 people 27 years ago.
Wow.
And now we're up at over 22,000. So there's been a lot of acquisitions around the world that's been our main means of growth.
Well, it was good that you chose Arizona. Good for us, good for the turnover, and good for jobs, good for everything else. Now, the company has stood the test of time. There's no doubt about it. What would you say that your strengths, and for that matter, any weaknesses are when it comes to Stantec?
I think, Stantec's never had a year where it lost money, and that in no small way comes from diversity. Early on, Stantec might have been a little overly dependent on some of the Western Canada oil economy, and in the 80s, I think there were some hard lessons that were learned and some management challenges that we weathered that really influenced the company, and that's why we're not just a water company. We were a water company originally, but that's why we also do architecture and transportation, and indeed that's why we're a global firm now, is to have that presence of diversity, so that you're operating in many different economies, many different areas, and as the needs of society move from one area to another, we're able to work across them. So it's a case of balance. If you're going to be around for a long time, you've got to be balanced and diverse and able to move nimbly when the world and the economy moves on you.
We're in a unique, geographical environment, Arizona, a desert environment. Water is one of nature's most valuable resources, probably even going to be worth more than oil one day. Can you explain what is being done to ensure perhaps a safe, sustainable water supply for here, the greater Tucson area?
Yeah, I think we're in a good spot. Obviously, we can never take our eye off the water ball, and so I think that one water approach that I mentioned is being deployed very successfully here with Pima County Regional Wastewater and Tucson Water and the other water utilities around town. They've got a long-term focus. In the history, in the early days, there was a groundwater resource that was depleted, and that's now being replenished. And, we do take advantage of the Arizona water right from the Colorado River. And with the drought contingency plans that were signed last year and the banked groundwater, Tucson Water puts a lot of water in the ground every year. We have more water than we need right now. And so the good folks over at Tucson Water are actively banking water for the future, so that as the climate varies up and down, we're not necessarily in the drought we saw 10, 15 years ago, but, we're still saving that water, maybe not for a rainy day, but for a dry day in our future.
Well, that's right. Well, I'll credit an article written here by Mary Minor Davis, where I think flashback 10 years ago, the Southwest was under a record-breaking 11-year severe drought warning. The Colorado River Basin was at an alarmingly low rate. I think it was not seen like that in more than 1,000 years. I don't know who was around then to tell us, but, and Lake Mead's water levels were at their lowest since it was filled back in the 30s. And local cities and towns were implementing strict conservation measures to reduce the flow of water to landscapes, pools, and, of course, the old golf courses get bashed and more. But you fast forward to today, and the glass is more than half full, especially in Tucson. How is that, John? Well,
that's the variability of our climate. there's hardly ever an average year when it comes to rainfall and snowfall up in the Colorado River pack. And, we need to be resilient, and with our water management rules and processes, we want to be able to handle, not just the drought, but also the years of plenty. And so I think the water management schemes that have been set up for the Lower Colorado Basin are proving, it's a serious challenge that we face on the Colorado River.
Mm-hmm.
And, through continued development of additional technologies, water conservation, we should be really proud. The amount of water we use per person here in Tucson is the envy of many other water utilities across North America. We do a good job. We can always do a better job,
Mm-hmm.
but, we do a good job of not using too much water. And we're making great reuse of, we're not just using water once and throwing it away. We've got the treatment technologies and the plants in place to use water multiple times here in the desert, which is what we need to do to maintain that position that we have, and to have that, 30 to 50 year supply of water looking downstream, because we want economic growth. Economic growth doesn't happen without water. So we've got to be able to provide that for our local economy here, so that we have that continued ability to grow our economy.
Well, when you look back, the Colorado River Basin, you're right, it serves 7 states' water needs. Back in 1921, motivated by California's big burgeoning growth then, those state leaders got together to develop a plan that would manage water resources to the future. And the Secretary of Commerce at that stage, Herbert Hoover, the 1922 signature for the Colorado River Compact, and that outlines the allocation of water for each state. So off it starts, but the agreement established the upper basin to include Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. And the lower basin includes Arizona, Nevada, and California. And I think it was in 1944 the U.S.-Mexico Water Treaty added an annual allocation to Mexico. See, so, it goes everywhere. The Hoover Dam, dedicated in 1935, hydroelectric power and store Colorado River water. But what's happening today, upstream, downstream, with all the blues, all the fights that are going on with who gets what and how and where and how it's divided? Where do you see this going?
I think the drought contingency plans, are that we're a first, not a first step, but we're a crucial step when they were all initialed and signed last year. That helped put in place some rules about how, in a situation where Lake Powell and Lake Mead continue to face storage challenges, and they're not full today.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if you can see the bathtub rings around Lake Powell and
Yeah.
Lake Mead.
Mm-hmm.
Those drought contingency plans give us the mechanism to adjudicate, water withdrawals going forward. There's additional projects that will continue to be developed along the Colorado. Utah is looking at the Lake Powell pipeline to address some of their water needs. A lot of the large users are at different stages of water reuse. Tucson's, well down the road of making sure that we reuse all of our treated wastewater. City of Los Angeles has a goal over the next 15 years to recycle 100% of its wastewater. We're helping them with that.
Mm-hmm.
And, ultimately this ability to reduce our reliance on the Colorado River through water reuse. Right now here in Tucson, we do a lot of indirect reuse. We take the Colorado River, we store it in some aquifers west of the city out in Avra Valley, so we can have it when we need it. But at some point, I think the industry knows that direct potable reuse, I like to call it showers to flowers, that we're making direct potable reuse, and that'll help us manage, even out further into the future, past our existing supplies, that direct potable reuse. The industry is getting ready. I actually have a water bottle in my fridge that's treated wastewater, so I'm saving it for a special day. But you can drink potable reuse. They do it up on the space station, and sooner or later, cities like Arizona will move in that direction as well.
Well, when I think about the CAP, as they call it, the Central Arizona Project, it was President Lyndon Johnson back in 1968. He signed the Colorado River Basin Project Act. And, of course, that established this Central Arizona Project. and was responsible really for the construction of 336 miles system. And that's what brings the Colorado River water to central and southern Arizona. 16 years, I think it took to, when they flooded Glen Canyon, it took approximately 16 years to fill 3,700 foot level in 1980, Lake Mead and Lake Powell. What of the future if we don't get the monsoons that we're used to? And the world weather is changing. There's no doubt about it. You can't go underground all the time for the basin, right? What's the story? What's the true story with that? People say, oh, there's tons of water, don't worry about it, but that's not the case, is it?
Well, no. I mean, water is of a limited supply, no matter where you are, and even in the desert, it's even more of an acute situation. So going forward, the water rights laws will come into play, and there's a great deal of legal framework over who has right to the water that's in the Colorado River, however much of it there is. And going forward, the drought contingency plans are in place now as a framework. But, for example, if Arizona ultimately doesn't have the ability to use Colorado River water, that's why we need to have some of these other systems in place. This one water approach, direct potable reuse, water conservation measures, and, capturing more rainwater and stormwater, changing our urban design standards that we've already started to do. At the end of the day, there's going to be a great deal of ingenuity that needs to come into play, and we'll need to adapt to a changing source of water. I think we can manage the quality, and so in terms of the quantity, it may just be coming from some different sources.
Right.
Less Colorado River water and more reuse and more use of rainwater and stormwater.
Well, it helps me to reflect, actually, when I think back in Australia. I forget the year that it came in, but the Queensland government at that time put a bit of a curfew on new building homes and new, builders, developers. They had to supply water tanks with new homes on the side of the home. These aren't all big round things. These are nice, square, rectangle-type water tanks that are put around the side of the house where you don't really notice it. But they took a lot of water when we got it. See, Queensland is a lot like monsoonal rain in certain periods of the year. So that water goes to waste, a lot of it. So when you start putting all this rainwater, into tanks, now you can water gardens and wash cars, and it's good enough to drink out of anyway. But, I mean, that adds to the situation. I cry here when I see beautiful monsoon water just going down the gutters. There could be something similar there, perhaps, one day.
No, and I think Tucson's taking some exciting steps in that direction. You can have, obviously, you have the plumbing in a typical house in North America is just providing potable water and taking away wastewater.
Mm-hmm.
You can add additional piping in the houses so that you have a gray water system. And literally you can capture, the water that's draining out the bottom of your showers, water that's coming out of your dishwasher and so forth, and reuse that water. We use about, say, 80 gallons a person per day, roughly, here in Tucson, as a rough number. The city of Cape Town in South Africa, they got into a very dire water situation. They were down to about 13 gallons a day.
Wow.
And they were, that's a 90-second shower a day, maybe a half gallon to drink, a sink full for your laundry, and a couple of hand washings and a toilet flush. I mean,
that's about it.
As low as you can go is, 6 or 7 times less than what we use here in Tucson. So, we don't want to get to that situation, but there's a lot we can do with conservation.
I know. I mean, I was watching the poor devils last night in the camps, the people out of war-torn countries, and they're lucky to get a plastic bucket full of water just for the day, and that's for the whole family. Never mind the kids and showering, but tell you what. When we come back, I'm speaking with John Take, who is the Executive Vice President, Water Business Operating Unit Leader with Stantec, and it's Tucson Means Business, proudly brought to us by the 49ers Golf and Country Club. We'll be right back. You're listening to Tucson Means Business on Tucson Business Radio X right here, coming out of the Stewart Title Building on Broadway. And, of course, we're proudly sponsored by the 49ers Golf and Country Club, a wonderful course and wonderful club here in Tucson. I have the Director of Memberships and Tournaments, Casey Polivchak. Casey, tournaments are a big thing for a golf club.
Absolutely. We are a semi-private club, which means we have membership available, but we also are open to the public. With being open to the public, we welcome nonprofit tournaments, fundraisers. We specialize in groups from 4 to 144.
See, this is an important thing, isn't it, in the community? Companies would love to do something for their staff, something that's different, but they don't want the course to be too hard, and they want it to be friendly. They want the service to be right, and the atmosphere to make it a really fun day.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
And that's what you strive to do, isn't it? It's part of your whole job, really.
I think that's what we specialize in is the... How am I going to say this? The tournament that's not looking at spending too much money because they're in it to make money for their charity.
Right.
So we offer really good facilities, a great golf course. But I'm going to be honest, it's not the best golf course in Tucson. It's not the nicest facilities, but everything is good out there, and your guests are going to have a good experience because of the value that they're getting for the cost of the tournament.
There you go. That's an important factor. It's all very well, wanting to have a great day out for everybody, but if it breaks the bank, then it defeats the whole purpose.
Absolutely.
And if you're trying to raise funds, which is an integral part, because Tucson seems to be a wonderful place for raising funds, there's so many people who support so many wonderful causes.
Mm-hmm. And there is a lot of, great causes out there. And, people they kind of come to a fork in the road. You got school sponsorships that, booster clubs. There's so many fundraising possibilities out there that we really have specialized in golf tournaments for people and helping them maximize the amount of money they can make. Mm-hmm. I've put together a brochure to help people that have never run a golf tournament that will kind of take them from step one until the day of the event.
That's very, very good. If people from somewhere now, maybe they're moving into Tucson with a new business, new company, whatever, how can they get hold of you directly?
They can call me directly at 520-749-4925. Extension's 212, but we recommend you go to the website. It's a great way to get information about the club on not only golf tournaments but membership. That website is 49ercc.com, FORTYNINERCC.com.
There you go. Casey Bolivchak. He's the Director of Memberships and Tournaments. He's the fellow to speak to. Now back to the show. Back with Tucson Means Business, and let me ask you this, John. How has the water industry been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, this has been an interesting time. It's certainly not the year that any of us in the water business or any other business were expecting. We had a serious initial disruption with our operations, moving people off-site and learning how to do construction and design in new means and field work. A lot of the work with water utilities are, they were deemed essential services. And so, there was that big initial disruption. We were doing some project work with Tucson Water, and we all had to learn all the ins and outs of video calls and how do we do work remotely. But I think the big disruption is yet to come. There's the drinking water and wastewater utilities in North America, just drinking water alone, for example, Tucson Water has suspended water turnoffs and their late fees, and a lot of utilities are doing that to help people out. But that's a big revenue impact, and that revenue impact and the fact that, non-residential water uses, you can imagine the U of A and a lot of the businesses, as they've shut down, they're not using water. Mm-hmm. So there's a big hit to the water and wastewater industry. I've seen an estimate that the water industry, the utilities, might take a $14 billion revenue hit. And that's a concern because obviously they want to maintain services to people. Water, especially in the time of a pandemic, is very important for hand washing and sanitation. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I think the water industry is going to see a lot of capital budget and capital planning change, and then that has a ripple effect through the economy because that construction and design employs a lot of people. So it's still sort of early days in assessing the impact to the water-based economy in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Cities like New York City, they've talked about reducing the amount of construction they're doing by 50%.
Wow!
So
due to water.
That's across all of their transportation and subway construction.
Right.
But they've seen a $7.4 billion revenue loss, and that money's now not going to be available for capital planning. So, there's the obvious human and health side of the pandemic, but on the business side, I think 2021 is going to be a difficult year economically as we work our way through these problems that are coming because of all of the impacts of the pandemic.
Let me ask you a dumb question. From a layman's point of view, you just talked about how much money is lost in reference to projects, stopped in New York and so on. A lot of it, to do with being able to utilize water and so on. And we can't waste water. People need to drink it and do it for other things. And people could say, well, to heck with the production and so on. Let's put the priorities with water first. And then we've got everybody jumping up and down with, and whether you like it or not, it seems to be there is climate change. Now, having said all this, why is it so expensive? And could not the money be relocated to use more salinization? If we're going to get flooded anyway by ocean, why can't we take some of this water, keep the ocean down so we don't get flooded out, and use that water? I mean, is it that silly?
And in many countries, that's exactly what they're doing. California, out of everyone in North America, California's dipped their toe in the desalinization potential ahead of anyone else in North America. But there are many countries that they cannot meet their water supply without desalination. The issue is one of economics.
I hear it's extremely expensive. This is the biggest problem with it. Is that right?
Yeah, it takes a lot of electrical power to force the water through the membranes that remove the salt. And so, there's a problem. You have a concentrated byproduct stream from desalination, all the salt products and the mineral content. It's a nasty environmental problem, but you can deal with that. But at the end of the day, if push comes to shove, desalination could be deployed and would provide a lot of water. It just, that's no one's first choice when it comes to having a low-cost supply of water.
Interesting. One imagines pipes all over the place coming out of the sea. I mean, we live in a place where you turn the tap on and you just take it for granted. I was always brought up, turn taps off, no leaks. Wash the car with a bucket of extra garden water if you could, or something or other. But we just, people in showers, let it run for hours, it just amazes me. Well, what would happen one day when it's not there? Look at the poor devils in Flint. They're still lined up for miles being able to get water, 3 dozen bottles of small water, and that's so they can cook in it as well and have a wash. I mean, that's pretty scary.
That's exactly right. And I think unfortunate situations like Flint, that whole situation precipitated because Flint, Michigan tried to find a lower cost of water. They had a deal and a contract for water supply, and they believed they could create a lower cost water supply closer to home, and did not succeed with that new supply. And the water chemistry changed in the pipes and exposed the community to the lead and other issues that happened. Mm-hmm. And so, that the economics of water drives a lot of decision making, and Flint just shows how careful you have to be.
Talk about Tucson and money and the decision makers. It's not easy running any county or anything else. There's a lot of unhappy people with not from council is one thing and supervisors is another, this and that. You deal with these dudes. Are they with it? Are they on top of it? Are they aware of what our future is going to be? Are they planning for it, do you think?
I do. I think because we deal with a lot of municipalities, not just in Arizona, but across the U.S. and Canada, I think Tucson's done a very good job with its treated wastewater effluent reuse, with its move towards green infrastructure and capturing more of the rainwater that falls on the city. And then just, probably most importantly, the long-term water resource planning that Tucson Water has done, looking downrange to make sure that we're not developing the city beyond what a sustainable water source can provide and sustain.
Mm-hmm.
So, none of us like paying our utility bills, but the quality and the quantity and the long range resource that's been created for the community, and we, as a profession, we always know we can do better, and we strive to do better and learn the lessons that we see happening around North America.
Mm-hmm.
But having worked with a lot of different utilities, I'm proud that to live here in Tucson and to be part of a community that is not only taking care of, the people, but is also recharging water to the environment and releasing water back into the Santa Cruz, like Tucson Water started here earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
They're focused on the environment as well as the people and the economy.
And that water that goes back into that, is that reused water?
Yep. So there's releases from the local treatment plants here. So treated wastewater is released, and then as part of the whole one water cycle, there's Colorado River water and groundwater that ultimately portions of it end up getting released back to the environment.
So you hear a lot about how it's difficult to find land in Tucson or for us to grow. With all the things we still need, great roads and this and that, but there is a bit of development going on. But I guess, the whole water debate has to come into it to be able to supply and to service. Water is getting expensive here,
Yeah, and that's, points to the importance of water conservation. The simple replacement over time of less efficient water fixtures, whether it's a shower or a toilet. The water demand per person is actually staying stable in Tucson. So you mentioned the growth that's happening. That's so important. As that growth is happening, our overall, per capita demand is staying the same or slightly decreasing. And so if we weren't taking those conservation measures, then the math would tilt to an unfavorable spot. But, by pushing conservation and really being cognizant, like you said, seeing a running tap as a series of pennies falling out of your faucet. If you start to think about it like that, and we do conserve more and start to take more and more advantage of the limited rainfall we do get, I think we can match and have the high quality water and keep it affordable, and also permit that growth that we need for the greater good of the community.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that as a desert city, Tucson faces unique water challenges, and we're doing okay. We're doing okay. Nothing to worry about.
I think so. I think so. Well, there's it's weather and climate, so tomorrow's always a new day, and so we'll have to stay vigilant. But you look across, for example, you look across I-10, and I look at the different communities and the challenges, from LA all the way through to Florida. I know we don't like to talk about ASU much here down in Tucson, but there's an interesting initiative that has a water flavor. Exactly. But they've started up an initiative called 10X, and it's looking at the communities strung out along I-10 from west to east. And it's interesting, all of the common shared challenges, whether it's the challenges with too much water in New Orleans or not enough water here in LA and in Phoenix and in Tucson. We share a lot of common challenges along I-10, and there's some good conversations. And so, that helps Tucson identify, what's Los Angeles doing, what's Phoenix doing, what's a community like Houston doing to capture its rainwater. And so there's some really good dialogues, more than, in the past, that I'm seeing emerge, that, Tucson gets to share its great stories and then also learn from the experiences of others. So that gives me a lot of hope for the future, Mark.
Well, I'd never experienced this before, but I have a very good friend who lives up in Scottsdale. I won't say exactly where this particular location was, but a beautiful home, a stunning home, right? Absolutely lovely. Beautiful swimming pool. Everything is amazing. I go to the toilet one day and I couldn't go. Guess why? No water. And the water is a tank where a truck has to go in between X amount of houses to load up the tank again before you get your bit of water that you pay for. Now, talk about, third world. If I've ever seen anything like it in my life, why, the connection there would be very nice indeed, but I guess that costs a lot of money to do those sorts of programs, right, into new developments.
Yeah, you're getting out on the edge of water sustainability if it's arriving at your home in a truck.
Yeah, right. Let's talk about this rotten, lousy, miserable COVID-19. How has your business operations here in Tucson, how have you been impacted?
Yeah, so I remember back in kind of early to mid-March, we made the decision to close down fairly early, and we've remained closed. So, our work is essential. We've found, we don't often as a workforce have good things to say about IT professionals, but my goodness, the IT, I think a lot of businesses would be very appreciative of all their IT staff right now.
Yeah. Done a lot
our
of good
ability
work,
to get to get our workforce working from home. We've all learned to become very proficient on video calls and so forth. And so, we've kept our office closed. We think, we don't have to have our people congregating together in order to get our work done. So if we don't have to do that, we'd rather not take the chance and let the people that have to be out there working out and about, save those, in case there is a healthcare demand, it doesn't need to come from us if we don't have to be working. So, we took out of our 22,000 staff, over 20,000 of them they've been working at home for 6 months. And so it's been an interesting social experiment. It's hard to maintain a workforce remotely. So we do a lot of extra meetings and happy hours and board game nights and just trying to connect our staff. It's been a strange year.
Yeah, it is, and it's not easy. My studio is normally it's located in the Stewart Title and Trust Building on Broadway, and that's the corporate offices there. And of course, closed down, due to the pandemic and so on. So I work from home now at the moment, and I miss the gang. I miss everybody, and I miss being able to socialize. This work from home jazz is all very well, but it's also very lonely. It can be very lonely. And I was talking to people the other day. I offer the choice to do, Zoom Live, or a lot of people don't want to do it, but they're also sick of it. They miss the press the flesh, they want to get back to that. But what would happen if we had to live like this for a couple of years? I don't know if we could handle it, to be honest. It's certainly taught us a few things, that's for sure. But, the IT guys have set up companies and offices. They've done a marvelous job. But there's a lot of places, too, that weren't ready. And, they're finding it now. I mean, Zoom, I think, what are they, another 500 engineers or something they're putting into TMB just to be able to handle the workload now,
That's amazing.
It's amazing. Now, what sort of projects, again, does your water team here in Tucson mainly work on?
So typically here in Tucson, with the 30, 40 people we have here, we're doing a lot of conveyance work. So, the University of Arizona has an expanding campus. So we've been working on some projects with Pima County Wastewater to reroute and create some new capacity in the sewer collection system for the University of Arizona. We've been working with Tucson Water on their water recharge facilities out in Avra Valley. And so we do a lot of conveyance work, so pipelines and pump stations. Up in Phoenix, we do a lot of work on treatment plants, so, working with new facilities in Buckeye and Gilbert. But again, with our staff all off working remotely, they, get a chance to work on projects all over North America. So we've got staff that are, even working on some irrigation projects in New Zealand here from Tucson. So I guess that's the one upside is, we've learned how to work together a little bit more efficiently remotely, and we're able to take advantage of the world economy as well as the Arizona economy.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of water in New Zealand once that snow melts, of course. Beautiful country. I've lived there and worked there, and a lot of Americans love New Zealand. It's a very pretty place, just over the pond from the Great Oz. So, in your mind, getting close to our close, what are the largest challenges do you think the world faces in terms of water going forward?
Yeah, I almost wish I was starting my career over. I think about where the world is and the challenges that I've worked on, the last 25 plus years. And, I think if I were a young engineer looking forward, I think urbanization is probably one of the top three. 800,000 new urban residents get added to cities around the globe. That's every week, Mark. And so, we've gone in 1950, there were 9 cities over 5 million in population. Well, now we've got 66. And, that increased urbanization and is going to draw more of the world's population to areas of high water stress. 2.5 billion new city dwellers by 2050.
Yeah.
And so that, I would say is one of the global mega trends, the move from, particularly in Africa, parts of Asia, we're going to have a lot of new, very large cities. And in many cases, the water supply source just isn't there.
No, that's right. That's right. I mean, an example of that, just sharing with you, most of the population of Australia, as an example, is on the east coast and around the fringes, right? So much land, bigger land mass than America. So much land is not lived on, not utilized, and yet, if people would just get out of the cities and open up more and more regional centers and more nice country towns and so on, and if there was a way of being able to do that, I think it would help communities all over the world, to be honest. And in fact, John, I've got to tell you, I've seen a map of America supposedly in the future, and not that much future either. I'm talking 20, 30 years, where a lot of the states are underwater, and that's pretty scary. You know what I mean? The water level rising and all of that jazz. So now you're talking real estate.
Yeah.
And now you're talking people wanting to get out of places. And then they've got to move to somewhere,
Yeah, so I think obviously climate change. So, urbanization is a challenge. You mentioned climate change. New Orleans, New York. We're doing a project now on the coast of Texas. I'd never heard of Orange, Texas, but it turns out that 40% of America's petrochemical large facilities are there. And, I was working in New Orleans and we were protecting people from hurricane storm surge. This project in Texas is one of the larger projects we've ever done, and it's just protecting petrochemical facilities. So climate change is a huge challenge. And then, the big one is food production. So we've got increased water scarcity. So we're going to lose, the ability to grow grain in the world because of not having enough water. That's a 30% cut to our future ability to produce grain. And at the same time, the population is growing. We need 70 to 100% more food for a growing population. And so it's awfully hard to have grain and livestock without water. And so I think the food production, and then, people also need energy. So there's some big challenges ahead.
That's it. You've got to feed the world, the numbers. I mean, there are those that say, well, that's why we get these pandemics. The good Lord wants to level a few things out and, that's their opinion, of course. But what about growing more internal in factories? And I like the idea of gardens in cities, but maybe on rooftops as well. Do you think, like farmers markets, but they're on rooftops? Do you think we could?
And I think we have to. You've hit the nail on the head there, Mark. I think we have to not only encourage and create the regulatory space for urban agriculture. I actually think one of the big industries that's going to need to grow is urban aquaculture. Actually starting, and this is, we're seeing more and more. We're helping urban get developed over in New England, up in the Pacific Northwest. There's a growing. I actually have one of our PhDs up in Phoenix is making plans in his house in out in his backyard in southeast Phoenix. He's going to install his own tilapia pond because he wants to help solve that problem. He thinks he can grow enough tilapia to almost support 4 or 5 families.
Wow.
And so that the aquaculture is an interesting, intriguing possibility to start to address, with a low energy use and a low input, to actually produce a lot of protein. And so I think that'll be, more and more of our fish may become, our fish diet might become more sustainable.
That certainly won't hurt us, that's for sure. And quite frankly, the way the world's going with the oceans, we've got to do something. That's big in Australia, the aquaculture. That was done many years ago. And it's a great thing. I mean, I've had fish out of it, and I tell you what, you'd never know the difference. In fact, even fresher and sweeter to a degree. But it's just the setting up and getting the measurements correct and all the, the chemicals right and what you've got to do. But, I mean, look at the sea, man. It's the rubbish that's in it, the poor things that are getting strangled by all sorts of rubbish in the sea now, and the fish are depleting desperately. And we've got to do something there as well. So, I don't know, you've got challenges, all right, and thank God there's guys like you running around with working with others to figure it all out. John, where can people read about you at Stantec? What, do you have a website? Of course you would. Stantec.com, right?
That's correct.
That's it.
Yep, and we're present on social media, so at Stantec on Twitter and on Facebook as well. So, Google's our friend. We're easy to find when you tap Stantec into Google.
And if anybody wants to have a chat with you, or they're interesting along these lines, maybe career-wise too, they can also contact you. You're a friendly sort of fellow. You don't mind, do you? That'd be a nice thing.
No, I'd be happy to. Happy to talk to folks, for sure.
That's great. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. John Take, as in takeaway, Take, PEPNG, Chief Cook and Bottle Washer. He's the Executive Vice President of Water Business Operating Unit Leader for a big company, initially out of Canada, but here in a big way in Arizona, right here in Tucson, Stantec.com. Look him up. Be interesting. John, thank you so much. Fascinating. I learned a lot. And I wish you well with the company and what you're doing for us. Keep up the good work, won't you?
Thanks for the opportunity, Mark. I enjoyed the conversation.
You're most welcome. Thank you, John. And that wraps it up for another Tucson Means Business. Thank you to our wonderful sponsors who have sponsored me over 3 years now, both on KBOI Radio, 10:30 a.m., and now here on my own channel with Tucson Means Business and also the Mark Bishop Show. But I'm talking about the 49ers Golf and Country Club that have been hit very hard by the pandemic, as with a lot of businesses. And you can support them by playing a bit of golf if you want. There's rules and regulations to do, but you're out in the sunshine a little bit. There's just no restaurant open at the moment, which is hurting badly. And, of course, there's a lot of other facilities at the club, but they're all closed down as well, the gym and so on. And they're, abiding by all the rules. But it would help support if you've never played golf. If you'd like to have a bash, what the heck? Get out there. Single carts if they're not family and connected. But even then, using single carts as well, if you want to. But check it out. The 49ers Golf and Country Club, all right, they're on Tankerverde Road, and it's past the Emily Gray School on the right-hand side towards Reddington. You can't go wrong. Very friendly club. All righty, got to go. Thanks a lot for your company, and I look forward to sharing with you again when we meet very interesting people and our business leaders for another Tucson Means Business.